Interesting. I got confused about the topic today, but I think I got it now. We're really talking about, and this is an interesting topic. I think everybody will enjoy this one. First you got me confused. You're telling me about circumcision, and you're comparing circumcision to assimilation, and I got confused for a while, but I think I get the point. Mm-hmm. I think I get the point. We're talking about it really got bad for the Jews. People don't like the Jews, maybe when they assimilate more. That's kind of where we're going here. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking back to my days. We've talked about where I grew up. In a little small town of Virginia, and I went to school at the Heinrich and Greta Himmler School for Boys. We talked about that. Great school. Loved it there.
School for wayward boys.
Wayward boys. And I learned a lot there, and I thought I had it all figured out, how to get over, the anti-Semitism. I did everything right, I thought. And now I'm kind of wondering, did I do it right? Maybe the kids really didn't like me. And I'm thinking, every day we had dodgeball. When we went to gymnasium, we had dodgeball. And I did notice that coincidentally, by the luck of the draw, the teams were always picked out. You had the Aryan Youth versus me and little asthmatic Irving Teitelbaum with a back brace. I did notice those were always the teams. It was, right. And I thought that was just a coincidence. Maybe it wasn't. Boy, those kids could throw hard too, which was kind of scary.
Right.
But I did everything to fit in. I thought I did all the right things that would make them like me. I got all the merit badges. I got the one for plundering, hindering, bothering, bludgeoning, which was a good one. I got all the merit badges. I even got the summer camp. I went to the camp, and I got the merit badge for keeping everybody in line during roll call. I did everything right. So I don't know what happened. They
still didn't like you.
They still didn't like me. And even, I didn't win the soapbox derby, but I got honorable mention in the boxcar derby, which I thought was really good. So I was there. I mean, Little Hans still calls me every year in November and wishes me a happy Crystal Knock. So I thought I made friends. Now I'm wondering, they maybe didn't like me.
Were they really your friends?
They might not have been my friends. They might have had something against me being Jewish.
Yeah.
And maybe I was doing everything wrong. So I'm hoping today you can help me.
Well, I'm going to try to clue you in.
Okay,
I'm going to try to clue you into the real story here.
Right.
And we're talking Egypt, the Jews in Egypt.
Right.
This is because Passover is hard upon us. Passover is going to be 2 weeks from this Friday night. So 2.5 weeks,
Right.
And Passover, of course, has a really interesting history of the Jews in Egypt. So you got to go through stages. Things weren't always bad for the Jews in Egypt. As a matter of fact, things were actually pretty good for a while for the Jews in Egypt. Yeah. Then they got really, really bad for the Jews in Egypt. Then they actually turned really good for the Jews in Egypt. And then they got up. So what was that all about? We have to look at the stages. Where did it start? Joseph is the viceroy of Egypt. Right. We all know what he did for Egypt. He engineered this great amassing of wealth to Pharaoh, which means brought all the money and all the resources in the country. He brought them into the government coffers. It's a complete and total government takeover. Really Pharaoh loved him to pieces, right?
Yeah, it was almost like Bernie Sanders. Everything. Government took over.
What's yours is mine, and what's mine is mine.
Right, I like it. Yeah.
But he did it voluntarily. They all did, he had the food, and they were hungry. So they first they bought the food, then they didn't have any more money.
And they forgot about him somehow.
Then they gave him first. Before you know it, Egypt owns all the property.
Right.
So you would think that especially the government, maybe not the people, but the government should have really, really considered Joseph a big hero, from a governmental perspective. Now, he'd be like the FDR of democratic Egyptian history.
Right.
Then there's an even more amazing thing happened. They were in the middle of a famine. 7 years this famine is supposed to last. On the second year of the famine, Jacob comes down to Egypt. That was a big deal. Jacob comes down to Egypt on the second year of the famine because Joseph has told them, when the famine hits, and now they've amassed all the wealth, and then the brothers come down.
I mean, the family of Jacob.
Well, Jacob, actually. First, the brothers come down.
Right. Okay, right.
And they want to buy, and then it goes through the whole episode where Joseph finally reveals himself, and he says, quickly bring my father down. When Jacob himself comes down, our tradition tells us that the famine broke because the famine was brought about by the Nile not flooding. When the Nile floods, Egypt is a system of canals. And when the Nile floods, the water raises and it fills the canal system, spreads throughout all of Egypt, and it irrigates the whole Egypt delta there.
Makes sense.
But if the river doesn't flood, if it doesn't raise the level, then it doesn't fill the canals, right? Because if they make it too low, then the river just dries up. So they have to make it, the canal level is when the river rises, then it fills the canal system. And because it was a couple of dry years, no rain, the river didn't rise. But when Jacob came down, the river rose. As he walked over to the river, everyone witnessed the river literally rose in its level and filled the canals, and the famine was broken.
Wow.
So everyone in Egypt identified the end of the famine with Jacob. Joseph amassed all the wealth of the country into the government coffers, and Jacob ended the famine. Jacob, these guys did tremendous things from Egypt. They totally transformed Egypt into the greatest world power. All the wealth of the world is now in Egypt, and it's a prosperous place. And the Jews that are living in Egypt were doing quite well, really doing well. After all, if your name is Jacobson or Josephson or something like that, you're doing great. And it says in the Torah, the Jews, they multiplied and they swarmed all over the place, and they became very, very powerful. Everything that was in Egypt, every time you looked at the end of a hieroglyphic, the credits were in Hebrew, and all the Jewish names there at the end.
The Goldberg, Goldstein, I've seen the movie.
Right, that's right. Okay. So anyway, the Jews were doing really well. The Jews were doing really, really well. But then Jacob died.
Right.
Then Joseph died. Then all the brothers died. So the Jews got a little bit worried. And it wasn't the Egyptians that came up with this worry. The Jews got worried. What would happen if they would turn on us and they will want to expel us or treat us poorly? Up till now we've been treated handsomely, but what happens if our fortunes change? This is perpetually the Jewish problem. See, the Jewish problem, really the problem of any outsider, but Jews who live as outsiders always have to worry that something's going to go sour and we're going to get treated poorly.
That was me in third grade. Yeah, I remember.
Right.
Tough.
See, you always got to live like that because you never know what's going to happen, right? You always, as much as you try to be part of the gang, So what did they come up with their solution? Their solution was, we have to be really, 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 really part of the people. How are we going to be part of the people? We should stop circumcising. We'll stop circumcising. That way, we'll look like everyone else. We won't be a people apart. We will be like everyone else. And I don't know if they consciously decide to stop circumcising, or if they were in just such a headlong dash to try to assimilate and be like everyone else. And of course, you show up at the gym or whatever it is, and you want to look like all the rest of the guys. You don't want to be weird. Right. So the Jews stopped circumcising. Like I said, I don't know if it was like some edict or decree that they made, or just that they just naturally felt like we want to be with everyone else. But they stopped circumcising. All of a sudden, a strange thing happens. A new king takes over in Egypt who didn't know Joseph. How could you not know Joseph? Right?
All the hieroglyphics.
Everybody knows Joseph. Gosh, Everyone knows him. It's like, how can you not know, George Washington in America, right? Certainly there's a street or a public school named after him somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right? Even a city here and there, and a state, and all kinds of stuff, right? So this new king comes along, and he doesn't know Joseph. There's a dispute as to whether he didn't know Joseph or he just pretended like he didn't know Joseph. But the bottom line is, he says, who's the Jews? What do we get? What's with all these Jews all over the place? And now he gets negative on the Jews, and he starts making a plan to oppress the Jews. And before you know it, all the Jews are slaves. This is so interesting that all the Jews are slaves. When did they become slaves? After they decided to stop circumcising.
Right.
Meaning, when they started worrying about being different, and they tried to make themselves the same, that's when their fortunes went down the drain, and they started then become persecuted.
That's interesting.
They were enslaved.
That's interesting, yeah.
Things got really nasty for them. So the situation continued. We know the whole story until along comes Moses. Moses comes down, and Moses brings down his word from God. He tells Pharaoh, let my people go, or I'm going to bring a plague upon you. And he brings a plague, and then another one, and a third one, and a fourth one, and a fifth one, all the way up till 9 plagues. And then, an amazing thing happens. All of a sudden, the people fall in love with Moshe and the Jews.
Right.
What did they fall in love with Moshe and the Jews for? I mean, you would think that Moshe,
at this point, he would be that popular.
The most unpopular guy in the world. Everyone is like destroyed, beaten. The economy is in a shambles. They're physically wrecked, and it all happened ever since Moses came along. But the Torah says that this man Moses was the most popular man in Egypt. He was great in the eyes of the people. And it said, and the people found grace, the Jewish people found grace in the eyes of the nation. Why? I would think that the Egyptians, at the very least, at the best, maybe get out of here. But certainly they don't love them, they don't like them. So notice an interesting thing. When does this show up in the Torah? After plague 9, before plague 10.
Right.
What happened between plague 9 and plague 10?
That was the darkness, right?
The darkness was plague 9.
Right, well, obviously,
and then plague 10 was the first plague.
A lot of the Jews that were assimilated kind of disappeared in the darkness there.
That's one thing. And then Moses told them, you are going to do the Paschal Lamb. We're going to have this Paschal Lamb ceremony.
Okay.
But Moses told them, before you do the Paschal Lamb, you've got to get circumcised.
Oh, okay.
He told them, you've got to get circumcised before you do the Paschal Lamb. That's a pre-requirement.
I had the PG Haggadah. That was not in my Haggadah. They didn't mention that there.
It's there. It's there.
I got to read that
Moses
again.
says everyone's got to be circumcised in order to do, because a lot of the people weren't circumcised. They had stopped doing that already a couple of generations back. So non-circumcision was extremely widespread. So Moses says, we're going to be doing the Paschal Lamb, and then we're going to be leaving. But first, you've got to get circumcised. So the people went out, they got themselves a lamb, and they got circumcised. And they got ready to do the Paschal Lamb thing, and it says, and Moshe was so popular in Egypt. What happened? As soon as we read, as soon as he circumcises everyone, now Moses is popular.
Wow.
Up until now, they had been popular. Then they went way down, unpopular, and became slaves. And that happened to correspond to the time when they stopped circumcising. Now, under the worst of circumstances for the Egyptians, the Jews circumcised themselves, and all of a sudden their popularity shoots up.
Wow.
Unexplainably, their popularity shoots up. It's very strange. Very strange. So, what do you see from this? There is a moral tale here.
I'm betting there is.
Here's the moral tale. That there is something called, and everyone tries to do this, when you're a stranger, nobody likes to be a stranger. No one likes to show up at the party wearing the wrong clothes. If you thought this was a costume party and you show up with a costume and everyone's wearing formal wear, it's like,
yeah, I'm the moron who showed up in a white hat and a white suit after Labor Day. I know what it's all about. Trust me, I've been there.
I'm dead. I wish I was just dead, Right. So everyone wants to be part of the group. You want to assimilate. You want to be part of all that,
Yep.
And that's true. That's an international thing. It's a universal experience. But for the Jews have been given this challenge. They've been sent out into the world to wander all around the world and to remain outsiders. It's a big, big challenge to go to every party and always be dressed wrong.
Story of my life.
That is a real hassle, right? And all you want to do is, can't I just go somewhere? It's like I was standing in line taking a flight the other day, and I'm wearing my black hat, and I was going to a wedding wearing a black suit, and my black hat and all that. And the guy says to me, "You're an Orthodox Jew, ain't you?" And
observant people.
I said, how could you tell? So, listen, when I walk out, when I'm in the airport, I know that everyone is looking at me. And some people are going like, what's that? And other people, the wise ones, are going, that's an Orthodox Jew, right? But I know that, I'm not just walking through the crowd unnoticed.
Right, that's true.
That is the way it is, okay? That's the way it is in the grocery store. That's the way it is in the airport. That's just the way it is. Okay, but depending on where you go, I've run into some anti-Semitism here and there, but I've run into an awful lot of positive Jewish sentiment also. But the point is that for us Jews, it's a challenge, and a specific challenge. The challenge is to go be in the diaspora as a Jew. That's what the game is. We're playing this game, and the game is to see if you can get through this whole thing dressed as a Jew.
Wow.
So a lot of people along the way say, hey, this is crazy. This is such a hassle. I just want to dress like everybody else. I just want to be like everyone else. Yep. But the rules of the game is, the purpose of the whole game is to get through the exile being a Jew. And as soon as you try not to be a Jew, so the other players in the game, which is everyone else in the world, they go like, hey, you can't quit the game in the middle.
You're cheating here.
That's cheating. That's not the deal. You're supposed to be the Jew here. Someone got to be the Jew. You're the Jew. How can you not be the Jew? How can we play the game without a Jew? The whole game requires a Jew, right?
Wow.
It says, find 4 non-Jews and a Jew. Give out the cards to everyone, right? You got to have a Jew in the game.
I got the Jew card, but I don't got the Jew look. Right.
So you can't, why aren't you a Jew? You got to be a Jew. So as soon as you start not being a Jew, then everyone's mad at you. They don't like you. If you will be a Jew, so then they'll like you. They'll play the game. It'll go on. But if you try not to be the Jew, they won't. And so for us in Egypt, the model of that was circumcision. Circumcision was that symbol, that very indelible symbol on the body that I'm Jewish. The other guy's not Jewish. That's the only way it is. We might both speak Egyptian. We might both dress the same. Those little short white skirts and the lace-up sandals.
By the way, with my
straight hair,
that did
shoulder
not look
length.
good on me. That did
Don't
not
like
work.
that shoulder length straight hair.
I don't have the legs for the little short skirt. Is what this doesn't work for me.
The bangs.
The bangs didn't work for me either. No, that was
no. Have you ever thought of that?
No,
just straight across.
I'm going to stand out as a Jew. This is how I look.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing is you always got to walk sideways. Everyone walks sideways. Everybody well, how did they do that?
Rabbi made a good joke there.
Why didn't they do that? So anyway, the Jews have got to be the Jews. When they tried not to be the Jews, it went really poorly for them. Amazingly enough, in the worst of circumstances, as soon as they started being Jews, everything went good for them, which is totally counterintuitive. The Egyptians should have hated them. When the Egyptians should have loved them, they hated them. When the Egyptians should have hated them, they loved them.
So let me get this straight. What you're saying is, if I went as a little boy, if me and my buddies Adolf and Erwin, and we're sitting around the thing in Hans, and if I wore those little high white socks with the little sandal shoes and the big furry hat, they would have loved me? Is that what you're saying?
Lederhosen, yeah.
Well, I'm talking about the ones, not the Lederhosen, the ones that...
You would have been Hasidic?
Yeah, would they have liked me then? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty interesting. We'll have to see.
I still would have had a problem.
You might have had a problem, but I betcha they would have been a little, spooked. A little reverential even.
They could have been.
Ooh, who is this guy?
What's this
right?
dude?
Instead, it was the Jew boy, and
Yeah, I remember that.
Right. So when they do the Jew boy thing, right, then they beat you up. But if you're really, really Jewish,
it made a difference.
Right. Now, this does not mean, of course, that throughout all of history, people who were very, very overtly Jewish were spared from any anti-Semitism and all that type of stuff. But what he's saying is that in general, as the peoplehood of the Jews goes, that when the Jews strive for distinction and identification as Jews, it generally goes better for the Jews.
It did in Shushan.
Right? And when they try to go to the party in the
work too well.
It doesn't go well. Things go negative for them. And there's famous rabbi, I've quoted this before, Rabbi Meir Simcha from the town of Dvinsk, and he died in 1926. And he said, because it was a huge assimilation going on in Europe at the time, and he said, and of course in America too, and he said that there's going to be a huge anti-Semitic backlash coming up.
You got that
and he
right.
said it's going to start in Berlin. Now he died in 1926, so he wrote this sometime before that. He says it's going to start in Berlin. It's, of all things, why Berlin? Because he said in Berlin, the Jews in Berlin, they had a motto: Berlin is our Jerusalem. So he said they proclaimed Berlin as their Jerusalem. So therefore, when this anti-Semitic backlash comes, it's going to come from Berlin, because they tried to replace Jerusalem with Berlin, and that's exactly where it's going to come from. He died in 1926. So this is he really, nobody predicted Nazism or Hitler or anything like that in 1926.
No.
That was like totally off the map, but he called it. He called it. It wasn't a great big call. He knew that the function of the Jews in the exile is to be separate, and the function of anti-Semitism is to see to it that they stay separate.
Wow, so that's a toughie. Yeah, so interesting. So assimilation, which obviously, if we look at today, assimilation is froth in the Jewish community. I mean, more so probably than most other times. Are we in trouble here? I mean, obviously, there's you can see today in the world, anti-Semitism is on the rise in Europe and in Israel. I think what was it? They just named the UN just named Israel as the biggest aggressor toward women, or what it was, or something like that, on the entire earth, not all the Arab world. Right. I mean, so I guess it's pretty much it's how it works.
Right. Well, that's kind of interesting, and many people have said this. The establishment of the State of Israel created a focus for the whole world on the Jews, and really, the State of Israel has a responsibility, since it's so high profile and it's so overtly Jewish and wants to be Jewish. It has a responsibility to be Jewish. Now, the State of Israel struggles with its identity between those that want it to be Jewish and those that want it to be a representative democracy. And this is a big internal struggle.
Well, your argument, you kind of make an argument for the stay Jewish type side of that.
Right, stay Jewish, things will be better for you. Right. And that's my contention. There are those who are struggling to say, no, we have to show the world that we are just a good, stable democracy. I'm saying that the world doesn't want to see another good, stable democracy in the Middle East. The world wants to see, the world basically said, if we went to the trouble at the UN to take this whole vote, and it's the only time that Russia and the United States agreed and everything, and we went to all this trouble, and after the Holocaust, we created a state for y'all, right? And you got this state, and it's called a Jewish state. Well, then be Jewish. Go there and be Jewish in it. And when you're not being Jewish,
we're not saying that out loud, but I mean what you're saying is
that's what we feel that. That's what I feel that they are. That there's an unexpressed sentiment. It's an unexpressed sentiment, and that the world would have more respect, just like if you had been like overtly Jewish. Like you were the kid, you were wearing your tzitzis out, maybe you had to pay us and all that. I think
I would have been beaten half the time.
I really think, I don't know, we'll never know. We can't go back and redo it. Right. We'll never know. But I think that actually they would have been so afraid to lay a finger on you, because you'd be just so out there, like, whoa, what is that? The teachers probably would have said, like, don't touch this kid, he's weird, stay away from him, man. Yeah, they'd probably stay away from you, and they think you're weird, but I don't think that they would beat you up, because you'd be so weird that you'd be like in a different realm. But when you're trying to be like them, and they know that you're different, that's when they get on you.
Wow. See, I mean, I needed you back then,
I could have coached you up. Could have got you through this,
Yeah, it was a tough
yarmulke.
I got dodgeball scars all over my body.
Yeah.
They don't know what out means. They know he's out. No, they just kept bombarding me with the ball.
Take this, Jew.
It wasn't good. But so if you're saying if I would have just not assimilated, I was a good assimilator.
Right.
That was one of my best things back then.
Right.
I did notice that a couple other Jewish kids there. We were not only were the best assimilators, some of them were the ones who were leading the Jew jokes, and everything, because they were so good at assimilation.
Right. Well,
I noticed that in today's society as well.
This is a standard thing, is that they hoped that they could get in on the front end of if you give the Jew a hard time, then you've really assimilated. But
some of the best bashers of Israel today are Jews, which I think are great.
Yeah, it usually doesn't work too well for them in the long run.
But in the short run, they fit in pretty well.
Yeah, right. Wow. I think they can get away with it.
Okay. No assimilation then. No, we don't assimilate.
No.
We are who we are. We're meant to be Jews, and we're supposed to be the Jew.
And then we can live as proud members and functioning members of that society.
Wow.
But if we live in that society as Jews, then we have a role and a place. We can function in that society, and we bring the contribution that we have to make to that society, and people respect that. That's my contention.
Wow. If you want to realize it, circumcise it. Pretty good. Keep that.
Ooh.
Be a good bumper sticker.
Wow.
Bag.
Wow.
I got the title of the show here.
Gee.
Wow. Pretty good. All right. No more assimilation.
Right.
Next week, we'll be back with something just as exciting, I assume.
Maybe we'll be back.
Maybe we'll be back after
After that one, who knows?
Not sure. See you then, maybe.
Okay.